Alright, what's up people? We're going to talk about recoil control today and some fun shit here. So this is going to be a discussion where I'm going to try to piece together my whole thing on this without doing it in the way that I do it in a class, right? Try to change it up just a little bit here, but just speak on it, and hopefully there'll be some things in this video that you haven't really thought about, or maybe some emphasis on some things that you haven't really thought about. And it's a way to kind of capture the dragon of recoil control with structure and technique, and not necessarily some kind of strength or talent or something like that. First things first, let's talk about the hands, because what we're really going to be talking about in this video is from the hands back, and how to start to really incorporate this structure and forearm tension, wrist tension, elbow tension, all these things, to combine them in a certain way, with one hand doing one thing, one hand doing the other, that allows everything to free up and slows everything down, and next thing you know, we're going to start really making some gains with less effort. But the first thing we need to think about here is the hands, and really emphasize what is the hand's job when we talk about recoil control. Okay, the hand's job in recoil control, and I'm not talking about grip and index and sight alignment, sight picture, all that stuff to build an index and a proper grip and trigger finger geometry and interface with the pistol and all these other things that grip is, because grip is the fundamental foundation to everything that we can then build all of our other fundamentals upon. Just in terms of recoil control, what do the hands do? So what I want you guys to think about in terms of recoil control is, I want to just make a Velcro pouch out of my hands to where I can sit this pistol in and it does not move independent of my hands. Therefore, if I'm gripping the pistol, it does not go pow, pow, pow and slide around or move around in my hands whatsoever. I want that Velcro pouch. If my gun goes pow, 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 my hands go with it, right? So that's the only thing that our hands are really responsible for when we're talking about recoil control. So that's the first thing to realize. When I tell people, especially beginners and people that are trying to figure out their grip, right? Every grip is a bit of a snowflake, so you got to kind of figure out the pressures and how to build the pressures for you to get the good front to back pressure and side to side to be able to put enough friction and leverage and surface area on the gun to get that Velcro pouch out of it, and to get good grip pressure so you never have any slippage. You need to figure that out, and as a beginner, by getting a little bit aggressive about it, by shooting into the berm is what I think is the best way to do it. Shooting into the berm with feel and watching the sights, and just kind of seeing what the whole apparatus looks like and what it feels like. And then also, if you can, take some slow-mo video to make sure that you're not getting separation where the gun is moving independently of the hands. Now that I have my hands doing their job, which the gun is not moving independently of my hands, now it's time to build our way back. Now it's time to actually start thinking about recoil control and how to do it with less effort, okay? And how to do it the right way, and not just trying to pull it out of our ass by being super intense, because if we're super intense about it, it's probably going to lead to tension in other places, probably going to slow us down, okay? I went through this whole thing. I went like a maniac and tried to grip and torque on the gun like a maniac until I could get the slide just to cycle like this, and then eventually I'm like, okay, I can see my sights and the slide's just cycling like this, and it's cool looking and all this stuff, but I'm slow in all these other areas. So I need to start backing that off and trying to figure out, okay, a little bit of the pliable hands and making your hands a little bit more like gum and all these kind of things. And how do I lock the wrist now? How do I start to work this thing back, the elbows and all the jazz here, to make it legitimate? So I can pull out the pistol and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's just as nice, just feels good, super easy on the eyes, because I've slowed everything down and I've softened everything. I give it a place to go, but I tell it where to go, right? So I'm allowing it, I'm not trying to stop it. I'm giving it a place to go, but I'm telling it where to go. So now let's start to work our way back from the hands. All right, your wrists. First wrist, strong hand wrist, okay? The strong hand wrist is right behind the pistola. This strong hand has the best possible advantage and grip on the pistol. So what, in my opinion, this is the way I try to teach it and get it through people's heads. This wrist is responsible for the mitigation of recoil. It is responsible for trying to soften the recoil as much as possible. It is responsible for being stiff to where it doesn't break, doesn't get broken, and it is responsible for trying to settle the entire thing down, so less muzzle flip altogether, okay? This right wrist is responsible for that part of it. So most people think the opposite way. Most people think that the left wrist would be the one that you're kind of torquing in and all that stuff so that the muzzle stays flat. What I think personally is the right wrist, being right behind the pistol, is the one that can do that the most. Plus, whichever hand you are, the right wrist or the left wrist, is probably the wrist that is smarter. It's probably the wrist that you have a better mind-muscle connection with because that's your dominant hand. So that's the one that you can probably do the most intricate work with as far as trigger finger manipulation and wrist tension and a little bit of pinky pressure tension so that you're not getting sympathetic grip issues. Like, this hand is probably smarter. So let's use that. And let's stop trying to rely solely on this hand and wrist, because the support hand is for grip pressure. It's not necessarily for recoil mitigation. Now, I think of the left wrist as the recoil control. Recoil control does not mean less muzzle flip, doesn't mean less necessarily to me. It doesn't mean less. It means more control. So my left wrist is the one that is actually steering things and making sure that I'm getting that straight up and down, that predictable recoil path. That left wrist is the one that's set in a spring steel kind of way so that it goes and snaps perfectly back to the same place. The forearms is where a lot of this starts to come in that we don't get talked about a lot. So now we're working our way back. We know, in my opinion, right? I want you guys to think about this. Whatever you think, you go ahead and do. And what we want to think about is creating a spring steel effect to really both of our forearms and both of our wrists as much as we can, so that when that recoil goes off, this is really the only thing I have in here that's like spring steel or like a leaf spring, that recoil goes off, the wrists are going to give a little bit. And again, I'm allowing it to recoil. I'm giving it a place to go. I'm just telling it where to, right? And that's where this second wrist kind of tells it where to go and how to come back. But that spring steel that we make out of the forearm tension and the wrist tension gives it an effect like this. Bang, 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 bang. It just snaps right back into place. Muscling it is where we get low shots, subsequent shots that bang, bang, and we're trying to push that thing back to the same place. Like, muscling it is the last thing that we want to do. And then if you think about it in terms of USPSA, your transition speed gets sucked away from you because you're bang, bang, muscling that thing back to that target again, when you want to be going right and over to the next one. You're muscling it back to that target. Chances are you're going to muscle it back there a third time, right? After that second sight picture, you need to be bouncing off the target nice and loose, allowing that thing to go, right? If you're muscling it, you're probably over muscling and causing yourself some time when it comes to initiating transitions. So when we start to work this thing all the way back, right? So this wrist, strong hand wrist, is going to be trying to reduce the amount of muzzle flip altogether. Support hand wrist is aiding in that, of course, but it's really trying to be that spring steel so that whatever muzzle flip we do get, whatever wrist bend we do get, it snaps back right to the same place, no further, no more, no less. It's a structure that we build. It's not a thing that we're actively doing in the moment. It's a structure. It's coming back already just because we've built the spring steel, right? We built that structure and that technique, so it'll happen. All we got to do is pull the trigger, dots where I want it, pull the trigger, dots where I want it, pull the trigger. Now, when we get talking more about settling the entire thing down, more about easier sight tracking, and more about giving the recoil a place to go, but telling it where to go, that's when we talk about the elbow tension. And I want loose elbows to a certain degree. Okay, as humans, we're not really that great at tensing one body part or one joint or one muscle section without tensing the rest of them. So you can have a good bit of elbow tension, but we just need to loosen it in one direction. So what I do is I give my wrists a little bit of a break because I allow my elbows to break upwards just a little bit, right? If I want to stiffen out perfectly and just rely all on wrist and forearm tension to just hold that recoil steady, it's requiring more wrist, more forearm tension. If I just let it go up a little bit and kind of rock back my elbows just a little bit and just pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up, it just makes things a little bit easier, and it slows down the entire process so that now I've got more of a rocking, recoil path and not a snapping recoil path. This is where I think a lot of gains can be made when we try to settle that and just slow down the recoil path altogether and get more of this going on and less of this. Snap, snap, snap. Now, if you've really got that spring steel setup going on in your forearm tension and wrist tension, and you let it snap a little bit, but you can snap and return it really well, you can get away with more of that. Me personally, I like to let the elbows absorb a little bit more of it so that I don't have to do that, and then I get a perceived easier, flatter, slower recoil path and perceived easier dot tracking from it. Different people are going to be slightly different in the ways they want to do all this, but we really, really must think about the structure and the wrist tension, forearm tension, and elbow tension of that spring steel. And we think about the elbows as well in that same kind of spring steel effect of boing, 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 coming right back to that same center line. If you think about the elbows having that little bit of tension in there and letting them pick up, and they just spring right back. Spring, 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 right back to the same spot. We're not pushing back, we're not over muscling. It's all just happening. All we got to do is think about sights. Dots where I want it, bang, dots where I want it, bang, dots where I want it, bang. And when you think about tracking red dot, like a lot of people, if they're really getting wrapped around the axle when it comes to tracking their red dot, a lot of the time, if you got that breaking wrist, sporadic, quick, frenetic recoil, it's really hard to track the dot. It just is. So if we can soften it and slow the whole process down a little bit, that's better. It's going to be easier from then on, absolutely, exponentially. But there's another thing that you want to get in your head as well, and that is, I don't really give a shit where it goes at first. I just care when it's back where I want it. So think less about watching it and wanting to see it the whole time. And I mean, I don't go like this or bang, 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 or watch it go over to the next target. Like, that's the last thing we want to do. So don't worry so much and get so wrapped around the axle about tracking that red dot and everything that we do, because then you'll start to really track it when it's totally disadvantageous to do so. So just think, when it's back in that A zone, or when it's back on that bad guy, or when it's back, like, I'll do what I need to do. I'll pull the trigger when it's back. I don't really give a shit where it goes. I just care when it's back. So that's one thing on tracking that a lot of people get way too wrapped up around it, especially as beginners, because to truly be able to track your red dot, you got to start to get a hold of this structure and grip. And first things first, we got to get the hands doing their job. The Velcro bag, right? We got to do get the hands doing their job. Then we got to get the wrists doing their job, and actually reducing some of that recoil and that frenetic bounce and crazy shit going on. You can track your dot all you want, but if your gun is recoiling like this, I can't see. Like, if I'm presented on the target, pow, I get this much recoil. Of course I can't see the dot, but I couldn't see, even if I could see the dot, if the window was this tall and I could still see my dot, I couldn't see my target because my whole front of my slide is in front of it now. So a lot of people that are trying to track their dot are not slowing down that recoil, reducing that muzzle flip enough to even worry about it yet. So let's get a little bit flatter tracking gun. Let's get a little bit more of that sewing machine tracking style. Let's get those wrists working, a little spring steel action, and the tracking thing will start to happen super quickly. The more you can settle it, slow it down, control it, put it where you want to, allow it to recoil, but tell it where to go, all these little things, and build that structure so that you don't have to rely on strength. Dude, women, children, full-size humans, mid-size humans, compact-size humans, doesn't really matter. We can all shred and do it with just so much less effort. I know that's a long kind of a topic there and everything, but I think it's something super helpful if you guys can stand to get through it. So take her easy. I'll see you soon.